I've done it! I've finally made a beautiful drawing. It turned out even better than I had hoped. Now I'll just take a step back so I could admire the rest of it. Oh. Oh no. It looks like an eldritch horror. Straight away, number one tip I can give when it comes to balancing proportions: zoom out. A lot of beginner and even experienced artists fall into the bad habit of narrowing their field of vision while drawing, thereby focusing too much on one particular part. This is how you end up with characters with massive heads, or vice versa. Ideally, you should be looking at as much of your page or canvas as possible while you draw, rather than at individual areas. This can be accomplished by reminding yourself to keep some distance between your head and your canvas, and by keeping your hand higher up on your drawing tool, where it won't get in the way. If you draw traditionally, I recommend taking a moment every few minutes to step back from your paper in order to judge how well the proportions are measuring up. The same thing can be achieved digitally by literally shrinking your canvas. One benefit to using a drawing tablet, other than a Cintiq, is that you don't have to worry about your hand getting in the way, as you're forced to look up at your screen rather than where you're actually drawing. Though this will feel strange at first and can take a while to get used to. It may sound a bit abstract, but keeping space between you and your canvas will give your drawing more room to breathe, and give you more mental space to visualize where the rest of the drawing is headed. A popular method of measuring human proportions is the Loomis method, in which you measure the length of the head, then duplicate it 7.5 to 8 times to find the length of the rest of the body. Keep in mind that this is based on idealized proportions, and that there will always be slight variations between figures. Head measurements also apply to figures of different ages. The larger the head is relative to the body, the younger a person will appear. This method of measurement can get more complicated depending on the pose, but still translates so long as you're using a straight-on view. An adult figure bent at the waist, for example, will be approximately 5 heads tall, and an adult seated in a chair will be around 6 heads tall. Ellipses can also be used to find the range of motion of the limbs, which I'll be referring to in my anatomy video. If measuring with heads gets too complicated, a good rule of thumb is that the length from the top of the head to the crotch will always be around the same length as the legs, making the crotch the halfway point. So 4 out of 8 heads, or 3 out of 6, etc. Lastly, I'll cover the pendulum method. If there's a body part you struggle with in particular, drawing heads too large being a common mistake, practice doing the opposite by drawing a lot of tiny heads relative to the body. The idea here is to overcompensate until your brain starts to find a good middle ground, similar to how a pendulum will swing from side to side until eventually settling in the middle. I first heard of this method years ago from Psychra. I'm not sure if that's where it originated, but in case it is, I'll be linking his channel in the description below. Now you can try the concepts I've covered in this video out for yourself. Remember to pause and create some distance between you and your canvas to better judge your measurements. Try using heads as a unit of measurement for your characters, and practice using the pendulum method for areas you struggle with in particular. I also recommend making your own observations when it comes to human proportions. I mentioned how the halfway point for the figure is at the crotch, but you may also notice that the wrist starts where the crotch ends, or that the hand is approximately the same size as the face, or that the thigh is about the same length as the distance from the crotch to the breasts. These comparative measurements aren't limited to humans either. It can be applied to any kind of subject. The images used when covering the Loomis method come from Figure Drawing for All It's Worth by Andrew Loomis, which I'll be linking down below as a PDF so you can study it for yourself. The more you familiarize yourself with average proportions, the easier it'll be to eventually start winging it as you draw without having to give it much thought, and the easier it'll be to spot when your proportions do look off and how to go about correcting it. Happy drawing, and I'll see you in the next video.